The asset-light businesses have done much better, and Airbnb has been able to capture long-term bookings. There's a key stat that Airbnb tracks, which is, do they have 1 million rooms booked in a day? And they just hit that again recently. What other platforms are doing surprisingly well, given what's going on here? Oh, a little company called Airbnb. So Airbnb is reportedly, it's so funny how this happens. Airbnb confidentially files for an IPO in August, and then everyone knows about it. So I don't know why they bother even saying confidential, but they're planning to go public in the fall once we come back from Labor Day. Basically, the story with Airbnb is, and if you remember, these private equity firms, Silver Lake and Sixth Street, they took some options in Airbnb. They gave them like $1 billion in kind of debt with some warrants. Really great decision, I think, on their part, as we see with this IPO. I think the IPO will do very well. Why will the IPO do very well? Well, you have an asset-light business. Yeah, the asset-light business just got torpedoed by COVID. But when we look at the landscape of travel and hospitality and what's going on with COVID and everything, the asset-heavy travel and hospitality businesses have absolutely gotten pummeled. In the short-term real estate rental space, right? A lot of the big high-flying names were companies like Sonder, Lyric, and a couple others. Many of those companies are basically going out of business. These companies, they own leases, right? They are the signor on the leases, and they have a very asset-heavy business model. As we've seen with Booking.com, bouncing back very strongly relative to the rest of the travel industry. Also in Platt, and just these asset-light versus asset-heavy businesses. The asset-light businesses, predominantly platform businesses. Marriott has kind of like an asset-light business because they have franchisees and they're kind of more just like a service provider-ish kind of business. The asset-light businesses have done much better, and Airbnb has been able to capture long-term bookings. I actually spoke about this probably in April, that you were going to see Booking, Expedia, and a lot of the other big platform players try to move aggressively into long-term rentals. VRBO, I think owned by Expedia, right? So Expedia also in Platt. Airbnb, I guess, has been able to hold on to that business, right? They've been able to convert producer community that have all these rental properties into now providing long-term rentals because there's a huge exodus outside of people leaving cities, myself included. So this is an article on Bloomberg about Airbnb's Q2 performance. Their revenue fell to $335 million in the period ending June 30th. That's down at least 67% from the more than $1 billion the company reported in the same period last year. So they had $842 million in Q1. So they had in Q2 of 2019, they had $1 billion in revenue. It's revenue, not GMV. Revenue from Q2 of 2019. So now they're down to 335. Drastic change. Okay. I'm not saying that Airbnb is fine and their business is dandy, but what I am saying is that I think all things considered, they are weathering the storm quite well and they can trim cost. They've been doing layoffs. They've needed to do layoffs. So they've been trimming cost, and there's a lot of fluff, okay, in that P&L. Okay, so it's very healthy, little fat, lots of fat in that P&L that you can easily trim out. There's a key stat that Airbnb tracks, which is do they have 1 million rooms booked in a day? And they just hit that again recently. On July 8th, guests booked more than 1 million nights of future stays at Airbnb listings around the world, the company said. It was the first time to hit that level since March 3rd. Clearly, that to me is a very big milestone. 1 million bookings one day. They hadn't done that since March 3rd, 4 months. Okay, that was a grind for them, but I think they're starting to see, and in other parts of the world that are, no one's really returning to normalcy here, but it's a global business. You have just in general, probably a global exodus out of people leaving cities and of having remote work. And if you can have remote work and you don't want to be in the city, and especially if you're younger, you don't have kids, if you have less dependencies, it's going to be much easier if you can work remotely to do an Airbnb somewhere for a month or 2 or 3, right? And you can kind of move around. Especially if you have furnished apartments that had meant to be rented for a weekend, what's stopping you from renting that out for a few weeks or a month or a couple months? And so I think you're starting to see that change. Obviously, Airbnb's inventory in the cities, that business is really hurting, and I wouldn't expect that to come back anytime soon. The rentals in cities, but I think especially like tier 2 cities, tier 3 cities that are more spread out. It's like a city, but it's also kind of suburbs, and you don't have as many of these issues with just being in a high densely populated area, which mega cities like New York City, unfortunately, have just been really devastated by. And I don't think are going to be the same for a very long time. Pains me to say it. I spent majority of my career in Manhattan. Our headquarters is right in downtown Manhattan. We paid a lot of money for that office space, and we enjoyed it a lot. And it's just, all that has gone away so fast, and it's just really unfortunate to see. And it's going to be a tough situation for these big cities. Anyway, I feel good about the Airbnb IPO. I think if you buy into this IPO, we'll see where it's priced at. We'll see if they do the Dutch auction, kind of the direct listing, or if they kind of do the more traditional route. But I think long term, right, as Airbnb's business is able to get that short term rental volume back, that provides a pretty good growth trajectory. Assuming if there is a relapse in the winter, then that timeline obviously gets elongated. But eventually, long term, over the next 3 to 5 years, as Airbnb's short term business comes back and they can return to a $30+ billion valuation, where, with these private equity firms, they're valued at 18. So, there's, I think, relatively good upside. We'll see where the thing gets priced, but long term, I do like the makings of what an Airbnb IPO could provide for investors. Hi, this is Alex from Winner Take All. Thanks for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the content. Feel free to leave a comment, ask us questions, and definitely make sure to join us on our next live stream.